Hi, I'm Mike. Well, the avatar version of Mike. Those that have been following the channel for a while will remember that he made this video a while back. Those that haven't seen it, I'll make sure he puts the link in the description. For now, we'll give you a quick recap just so you're up to date with everyone else. About a year and a half ago, Mike joined an organisation called Models for Heroes who supports veterans like him with scale modelling. Shortly afterwards, delivery van turned up with lots of different kits for him, and it's won by Accurate Armour, who he knew was quite an expensive brand and it was quite a difficult kit to build. And this worried him a little bit, so he ended up putting it on the shelf, keeping it to one side out of the way. Eventually, he decided that it was time to put on his big boy pants and go out and fight crime. No, he didn't go out and fight crime. He was very sensible and he made a plan on how to do the model. However, he still wasn't that confident in himself, so he got in touch with John from Models for Heroes, who he knew had been an armoured engineer and driven the Centurion AVRE when he was in the army. He told John his plan and John said, well, that wouldn't be that easy. Don't worry, I worked alongside the exact vehicle you're trying to make and I even have photos of it, so if you want I will help you and we can use the photos to do research. And Mike said thank you, that'll make things a lot easier. So that's where we're up to now, and let's get on with the video. Thanks for that avatar, Mike. As I said, today we're going to be looking at Centurion AVRE 165 Gulf War from Accurate Armour. And there are quite a few parts, so what we'll do is rather than go through the whole kit is we'll just look at a couple of techniques that you can try using for your resin kits. So without further ado, let's open the box and get cracking. So this particular kit is a cast resin piece, so there will be seam lines on it. However, because it's cast, they won't be too obvious and they'll be in a fairly predictable pattern. See, we've got some going down the flat sides here, which isn't going to interfere with detail at all. Should be fairly easy to remove. Another one on this side, and we've got one across the back which does cut across a bit of detail, but again shouldn't be too much of an issue to get rid of. Before we start working on this seam, please ensure you're wearing a mask when you're working with resin because it's really not good for you. That being said, first off we're going to file any extra hard or thick bits of the seam down, because second we're going to be using a blade, and the last thing we want is for the blade to slip and to cut our hands, because after all that's not what we're going for here. Before we move on to the next stage, I feel like I've got to explain something because I can guarantee somebody's going to pull me up on it. In the next part we're going to see me using Tamiya extra thin glue on a resin kit. Yes, I'm fully aware that Tamiya extra thin glue does not melt resin, I know. What I'm doing is using it for its other purpose, which is as a cleaner. For those that don't understand what I mean by that, I'm going to explain it now, so please bear with me. If you do know, then I'll put the timestamp up and you can feel free to skip forward to that time. Okay, for those that don't know, this is Tamiya extra thin cement. It's one of the glues we use in scale modelling, and you can get a 40ml bottle for around £5. This is Tamiya airbrush cleaner, and you can get a 250ml bottle of this for around £10. And finally, this is a bottle of own brand pure nail varnish remover that you can get for about £1 for a 250ml bottle from your local pound shop. So let's do some quick maths just to even up the size of the bottles so we can do a fair comparison when it comes to price. A 40ml bottle fits into 250ml bottle 6.25 times. Times 6.25 by £5, that gives us a total of £31.25 for a 250ml bottle of Tamiya extra thin. Now they've worked that out, let's have a look at the prices per 250ml. As you can see, Tamiya extra thin is roughly about 3 times dearer than the airbrush cleaner. To put it into even more perspective, let's take a look at per litre. Now we can clearly see that there's an £85 difference between the Tamiya glue and the Tamiya cleaner. But what does that matter? I hear you say they're two different products, right? Let's take a look at what they're made of. Tamiya extra thin is made of 50% butyl acetate and 50% acetone. And guess what the Tamiya cleaner is made out of? That's right, 49% butyl acetate, 51% acetone. And the pure nail varnish is made out of 100% acetone, or near as damn it anyway. But that 1% change makes a big difference, right? Well, actually no. All it means is that the cleaner will set fractionally quicker than the actual glue. Other than that, they'll both work exactly the same. That means if you're buying Tamiya glue, you are literally spending 212.5% more to get 84% less. And do you want to know what the real kicker is? Remember that little bottle of nail polish remover that cost £1 that was 100% acetone? Yeah, you can get a non-acetone version. And guess what that's made out of? Methyl acetate, which works exactly the same as butyl acetate. That's right, it's made from the second ingredient in Tamiya extra thin glue, and cleaner. That means you can go to a local panel shop and buy a 250ml bottle of pure nail varnish remover and a 250ml bottle of acetone-free nail varnish remover and make yourself up to £62.50's worth of Tamiya Extra Thin Glue for as little as £2, and it'll do exactly the same job. So that given that Tamiya Extra Thin is more expensive of the options, why have I used that on the kit and not one of the others? Well, it's pretty simple really. There's three reasons. One, I didn't have any Tamiya cleaner or nail varnish remover to hand. Secondly, the little brush makes things a hell of a lot easier for doing the small seams and the details. And finally, because it's a solvent based cleaner, it helps to remove any residues or greases from the resin without damaging it. And because it doesn't evaporate very quickly thanks to the butyl acetate, it acts in much the same way as putting water down on a dusty floor before you sweep it, in that it traps a lot of the dust and helps to reduce the amount that goes into your lungs, onto your hands and onto your desk. I really hope now that I've explained all that it makes a lot more sense, and I hope you found that informative and interesting as well. Well, I am really sorry for the aside, but I can guarantee somebody would have picked me up on it at some point in the comments, so I just needed to explain that. And if you're still watching, thank you for bearing with me, I really appreciate it. And now we'll crack on with the video. Welcome back. As you can see, we have plenty of dust on the desk here off this resin model, which is why we always recommend wearing a mask. We don't want to be breathing any of this stuff in, and that's why we're using the Tamiya Extra Thin not only as a solvent to clean the model, but also to act as a sort of liquid dust trap, to sort of trap all the particles and stop them going onto your desk and onto your hands and into your lungs. The first technique we're going to use here is scraping, and we do this by placing the knife on its back, making sure that it's the blunt edge going along the seam, and we also make sure that the flat side of the blade is the one facing towards our thumb, so that if we slip whilst we're scraping, it doesn't slice into us. And there we go, the turret's already looking much better. So we just check a few of the seams, make sure we haven't missed any sharp edges or any excess. And then we'll move on to the rest of the parts, but rather than bore you with that, we'll speed it right up and we'll get on to the next section. One of the things you may remember from the last video is that because this is cast resin, you do get these little blocks on the end. So to take these off, you really need a razor saw to get a nice clean cut. So let's stick it in the vise and just get it chopped off. There you go, that wasn't too difficult. Now we have a nice clean edge that we can work with, and it should fit nicely into the mantle on the turret. So let's crack on with cleaning up the rest of the gun barrel, and then we'll move on to the next stage. Now that we got rid of the majority of the seams, we need to get those last little bits down and get it nice and smooth. So we're going to look at sanding now. First off, you need to start with a fairly coarse sandpaper or sanding stick, say 400 or 800. As we get closer to the surface of the resin, we want to make that a little bit finer, maybe 1000 or 1200, just so that we don't scratch the rest of the resin, but we're still polishing off just that last little bit of seam. Before we move on to the final section, I'm just going to remove some of the small parts and show you them. I'm not going to do them all because there's far too many. When you're removing them, just be very careful because they are fragile with them being resin. Fortunately, with them being resin, if they do break, you can super glue them back together and it's not going to make any difference. As for the rest of the prep on these parts, it's exactly the same as the rest of the kit. You just make sure you take your time, scrape it, file it, sand it, and that's all there is to it. Before we continue, it's really important that we clean off any residues or dirt and grime off the resin. So to do that, we're going to need a bowl of warm soapy water, and we're going to need a toothbrush. Preferably a child's toothbrush. Softer bristles can do less damage to the resin. Another important thing to remember is that you don't want the water too warm for this, because the resin is affected by heat and it will soften the resin and cause it to flex. So skin temperature or even cooler is perfectly fine as long as it activates the soap. What we're going to do is we're going to gently brush around all the different surfaces, getting all the creases and the little gaps and things with the soapy water, just to get rid of any of the releasing agent, any of the Tamiya Extra Thin, the dust, anything like that. Just get it all cleaned off, and then that'll make it a lot easier for the primer to stick, or the paints and the other glues when we're moving on through the build. Once you finish scrubbing the parts, make sure you put them on some paper towels to drain off, and then rather than rubbing them, make sure you dab them with paper towel to get rid of any excess water, just because if any parts of it got warm or anything like that, we don't want to be damaging them or rubbing off any details. And the last part of the preparation is of course doing the filling, and to do that we're going to be using Humbrol model thinner, but there are other brands available. And first we're going to put some of the model filler onto some tissue paper. This allows any of the solvents that are in the filler to soak out of it. Then we're going to use a cocktail stick to pick up a bit of the filler, and we're going to use that to just force it into any little gaps or holes. Use it to smear on any larger sort of indentations, and we can also use the cocktail stick as a sort of rolling pin just to smooth things out, and then we just allow it to dry. And finally we file it smooth, and that's it. That's all there is to it on the filling. Once you've done that, that's your model prepped. And all that's left to do now is prime it, and then you can start painting it and assembling it. With all that said and done, I just want to say a huge thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. I will be making more videos on your Accurate Armour build as I go along, and I really hope you'll join me for them. In the meantime, I hope you stay safe. Keep well, keep enjoying your modelling, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.